Chief Operations Officer. James, thanks for coming on the show this morning.
Good morning, Gary. Thanks for having me.
So I want to get to the funding commitment that the Basin Water Board has made, but I just wonder if you could just give us, for those who don't know, and I'm sure many Okanagan boaters and other residents are aware of what invasive mussels are, but could you give us the Reader's Digest version of what they are, why they're such a serious threat to BC lakes?
Sure. So these mussels, zebra, quagga, and now the golden mussel, which is in California, are an invasive species, and they're very small, but they proliferate in massive amounts. One female mussel can produce 1 million offspring in a year, and they super filter a lake or a stream that they're in. And this basically takes all the food sources from the fish and everything down the food chain, and completely changes the entire ecosystem. And then when they start to die off in these billions of mussels, you get this accumulation of biomass and this release of toxins into the water, which can lead to these crazy algae outbreaks, like toxic algae in the water. They increase botulism and E. coli and things like that. And then once they die off, the mussel shells wash up on the beaches, and they're only about the size of a thumbnail, so they're razor sharp. You can't walk on the beaches anymore. And then when they're in their microscopic form, before they form shells and become adults, they'll get sucked into water intakes, and then they attach to the inside of infrastructure. They'll attach inside your boat motor, start to grow there, clog everything up. So we're talking about millions of dollars in damages to hydroelectric facilities, water intakes, boats, docks, marinas, the mess on the beaches, the water quality, basically just a complete catastrophe.
So how close are we, James, to seeing these mussels in the Okanagan Basin? Are they already in nearby provinces or in the states just below us?
As far as we know, the closest they are to the east is in Manitoba. They've been spreading. They're almost on the border with Saskatchewan now. And then they were detected 2 years ago in the Snake River in Idaho, which is a tributary to the Columbia, and so is the Okanagan. So they're in a shared river system, but they're downstream from us so far, and they won't spread naturally upstream. But, that's where they were detected is only about a one-day drive, less than a day's drive from the Snake River to the Okanagan. So they're getting closer. And we did a little computer modeling that without inspection stations at our borders, they likely would have been here by 2018.
Wow. So is it a matter of when and not if, James, in regard to that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Like I said, we've managed to keep them off for about 10 years now. And I think with proper inspections and, thinking about which boats can come in from where and the appropriate testing, which we're going to talk about, we might be able to keep them out for a really long time.
And let's get to that. OBWB has committed $200,000 to a UBCO. This is to help a new mussel detection technology, correct?
That's right. So, as I said, the mussels in their larval form, they're microscopic. They're really hard to detect. They could be in sitting water, or they could be adults, attached to the hulls of boats, but they're hard to find. They could be up in the boat motors and things like that. And so right now, the inspection is by just an inspector, or the best case scenario, there's a mussel sniffing dog. One of our local residents came up with the idea of an artificial dog's nose, kind of similar to the way you'd have your luggage swabbed at the airport and then put through a little sensor and it would tell you if there's drugs. This idea is that all organisms shed DNA into their environment. And so what Dr. Russello at UBCO Okanagan has proposed is there's a special little handheld vacuum that they use for crime scenes. It's a wet-dry vac, and it collects DNA. And so if we can develop a protocol to, vacuum little sections of the boat, take that filter and put it through a lab that actually fits in a suitcase and would be right on site with the inspectors, then in about 5 minutes you'd be able to detect whether that boat was in water that was infested with these mussels.
That's amazing. And I love that term, by the way, artificial dog's nose. That's a real game changer, James.
It really is, yeah. Not only could you determine if that boat had been in waters that you knew were infested, but if you swabbed other boats from that region and the boat owner said, no, I wasn't in an infested lake, maybe they didn't even know the water was infested yet. And so it might even be a way to determine which lakes are infested by testing watercraft.
So you mentioned you've been able to hold off mussels getting into the Okanagan Basin for at least 10 years. So this artificial dog nose, this tool, could it potentially help keep invasive mussels out of the basin completely if you can get it in fast enough?
I think so, especially if you think, as they get closer and closer, we might have to change our protocols. We might have to ban boats from certain regions. If it gets into Alberta, we might have to stop boats coming from there. What happens if it gets into BC but doesn't get into the Okanagan? How are we going to do that? So we're really trying to be forward-looking and think about operations and logistics. You might, at some point, have to have your boat swabbed before you launch it into an Okanagan lake. If that's the price of keeping these mussels out of our lakes and our infrastructure, then it might be worth it.
Are boaters, watercraft operators, are they educated on invasive mussels, James? Is the OBWB at the forefront of that?
We sure are. We have the Don't Move a Mussel program that we've operated since about 2013, and I'm very proud to say residents of the Okanagan are one of the most highly educated groups of people, I think, anywhere throughout North America on invasive mussels. The problem is the occasional boater coming from Ontario or Manitoba or any of these other infested places really either doesn't know or doesn't care, and part of that's because they've had mussels so long there that they've become complacent about taking their watercraft from one place to another. And so just I think last month, the province of BC intercepted a boat that was coming in from Ontario that had not only invasive mussels, but standing water that could also be carrying the larvae from them.
So in relation to that then, James, what is the responsibility of the federal and provincial government, I guess, to be more aware of this, to do more on this?
Yeah, so both the federal and provincial governments have legislation that make it illegal to possess or transport these mussels in any form. The province has been really good about enforcing the regulations through their inspection system. They've increased fines recently, but like everything, and particularly in the economic environment, funding is always very low. And unfortunately, the province has had to respond to the federal border crossings, and so we've also called on the federal government to provide more funding for several years now, and they have in the past, but we're hoping that they'll provide even more and really make sure that those Canada Border Service agents are stopping all watercraft and doing that testing right at the international border so that frees up provincial resources that can then focus on our interprovincial crossings.
So UBCO leading the way in this technology, by the sounds of it. How quickly could this be up and running, James, at, I guess, border crossings and other places where boaters are going to come to Okanagan Lakes?
So for the new technology, I think the components are in place, but what we really need to figure out is the protocol for testing, because we want to make sure that it is at least as effective as the dog's nose and hopefully more effective, and we also don't want to get false positives and things like that. So this is a proposed 2-year research study, and it's a little more complicated because we don't have mussels to work with here in BC. And so what Dr. Russello has done is he's working with the University of California, Davis, who's developed the genetic techniques to identify these specific species, and then he's working with researchers at Queen's University in Ontario who have access to all of the mussels, and they have labs that are set up with the mussels in them. And so he can test watercraft that are coming out of these infested lakes, make sure that those protocols are completely sound, and then we'll be able to bring this technology into BC.
You mentioned that the mussel has been detected in the Snake River. Are the Americans as vigilant as we are on this?
Yes. Idaho was actually one of the most vigilant states. They've had inspection stations far longer than we have. They've had 100%. And, if you were bringing a boat into the state, you had to have it inspected, and they had a cost for doing that. Everyone had to have an invasive species sticker. They would have been infested a long time ago, and I'm not sure exactly how those quagga mussels got in. It might have been a little fishing boat or something like that. Unfortunately, they used a chemical to poison that section of the river, which has knocked the mussel population down by about 55% over 2 years with 2 different chemical treatments, but it's also killed most of the other stuff in the water to about 100%. So there's no case in a large lake or a river that has ever been successful for eradicating mussels with chemicals or any other type of treatment.
And you also mentioned, James, that Okanagan residents are certainly vigilant, and boaters are certainly vigilant about what they are doing to help protect our lakes. What other advice would you have for them, and what resources are there for them to learn more about invasive mussels?
That's a great question. So my advice to boaters is to clean, drain, and dry your watercraft. These mussels can live for up to 30 days on a watercraft or in standing water. And then for more resources, you can go to dontmoveamussel.ca, or you can go to the provincial website. And even if you just Google invasive mussels, the provincial website is the Invasive Mussel Defense Program. That'll tell you all about inspection stations, your legal requirements to stop and get inspected. And it doesn't just pertain to power boats. That's also if you've got kayaks or stand-up paddle boards or anything that goes in the water.
James Littley is the Chief Operations Officer of the Okanagan Basin Water Board, which has just committed $200,000 to UBC Okanagan to research targeting of invasive mussels. James, very informative. Thank you very much for this morning.
Thank you, Gary.